Right, so what we're doing here is, we're now looking at day 3 of the How to Write an Awesome Short Story mini course. So lesson 3, this is for us. So at this point, you should be working on actually writing your story based on the plan that you made and building in lots of tension and lots of fun stuff. So let's see what happens today. I want to look at the mechanics of writing. Actually, what kind of writing you're going to use in what spots in your story. There are really 3 modes. There's action stuff. So this is people interacting with each other, maybe a big battle of some kind or what have you. There's summary or background, where you're summarizing events or presenting some background material, and then there's dialogue as well. So we'll spend a bit of time on these 3. Action, by the way, is the most popular. Not popular. It's the most frequent type of writing that you're going to do. It's important when you're writing action scenes to make sure that things happen chronologically. Now, in real life, there's things happening simultaneously all the time, but in the written prose, we want to show these things in chronological order, not before. So what does this mean? It means we need to pay attention to as and while. For example, while the sun came up, I had my coffee. Yeah, okay, you can do this. But it's often easier for a reader to understand the sun came up and I had my coffee. So it's this sort of thing that I mean. So here are some examples. She sneezed as she smelled the pepper. That's a really hard thing to do, to be smelling and sneezing at the same time. So a better way of presenting this would be, she smelled the pepper and sneezed. Now, when you were back in grade school, you were taught that the first way of saying this was actually better. It was more creative and so on and so forth. But those grade school teachers were incorrect. If you're writing for effect and for reader engagement, we have to be writing chronologically. So here's the bottom line for this. When you're in action mode, when you're writing action, we never summarize events either. You either show the action of the events or you leave it out altogether. So for example, if you think back to Star Wars A New Hope, there's that one scene on the Death Star where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader are getting ready to do battle with their lightsabers. Can you imagine if this was written where Obi-Wan and Darth Vader stare each other down? Your time has come, Obi-Wan, and prepare to meet your doom, and this sort of thing. And then it got summarized by saying, they fought for a few minutes and Obi-Wan let himself get killed and that was the end of it. No, you don't want it summarized. You want to feel the thrust and the parry of the battle itself. So we don't summarize events in action mode. Okay, so we as readers, we want to see the action. So you need to be aware of that. The second mode of writing is summary. So there is a time and place to use summary mode, and this is like to connect scenes. So if you're going from the first scene where maybe your hero is looking at the building next door that just got blown up by some kind of bomb or something, and they're having a reaction to it. You can use summary mode to connect the sections. And so you might be saying things like, for the next 2 hours, Bill stayed at his desk in the fetal position. So it's that kind of way of poor Bill, of setting up the connecting sections. You can use summary mode to report events. So it's just like if you've already gone through the big battle scene, and then your character is talking to someone else, they might say, oh, what happened? What happened? Well, you're not going to rewrite the entire action scene. You're going to summarize it. Well, despite being outmanned, we managed to stop the invasion, or whatever it was. We use it to telescope time. So every morning for the next 2 weeks, Joe arrived early for his shift. So if you want to move your story along very quickly, this is what we do. And also we use summary mode to focus on emotion rather than action. So you can have lots of action going on, but you intersperse some summary type of writing. So maybe Obi-Wan is battling Darth Vader, and then he thinks to himself, he feels the effect of the force. And so this is summary. It's not action. It's like what his internal monologue is saying, what his feelings are. So that's where we also use summary mode. Now, in writing background and descriptions, we have to be really careful here, because one of the common challenges for writers is they tend to want to write a lot of background information, thinking that if the reader doesn't understand all this, they won't get it. And this is a form of not trusting the reader to figure it out on their own. So one of the rules in the writing workshops is no info dumps allowed. You're not going to just sit there and write 2 pages of dumping of information about your world so that the reader can get what you're trying to say. We don't do that. We let the reader figure things out for themselves. In fact, readers enjoy doing that anyway. So you want to work in only enough background that's necessary for your story. So in your first section, for example, in your writing plan, you want to establish the setting and you want to establish who your character is, but you don't have to write 6 pages describing what your character looks like, or 8 pages of the small apartment where they live on the east side of town. The reader's own imagination will fill in the gaps. It's one of those wonderful things about the human brain. So this is so we want to avoid trying to teach the reader how to read this story or how to think about the story. Let them figure it out for themselves. They'll like it. And as always, you're going to do this through the viewpoint character's eyes, not your own. So you don't want to intrude as a narrator into your story. Let your viewpoint character do this. Okay? So for example, if your character walked into a strange house, one that they hadn't been in before, what's the first thing they're going to do? Well, they'll walk through the door, they'll look around, and they might describe a few things, right? There's a green sofa over there. There's a large bay window in the back looking out onto a huge garden. There's a corpse over there in a chair on the right. It's that sort of thing. So as your character sees it, that's when the reader sees it too. Now, dialogue is really important, and dialogue is one of those things that a lot of writers get wrong. And it really shouldn't be that bad. We always use dialogue to advance the plot, and this happens when people meet or when they're battling or they're making phone calls or texting each other, whatever it might be. They're using dialogue to do that. The problem with dialogue quite often is it doesn't sound natural. So the way to overcome this is, as you're writing your dialogues, actually say the words out loud. Is this how it sounds like when you're really talking? And that will help out your dialogue writing immensely. The other thing to be aware of are tags. Tags are things like he said, she asked, those sorts of things. We really don't need a whole lot of those. And we have to be careful with the kind of tags that we're going to use, and I'll show you that in a second. We also want to minimize gestures. They don't have to be scratching their head all the time. They don't have to be blowing their nose all the time or anything like that. We just want to get right on with the story. So a couple other things. Avoid writing in accents. Now, in the old days, there were a lot of writers who actually wrote phonetically. So if you read Mark Twain or Charles Dickens, you'll see this all the time. That they're trying to present the character as they really spoke, but that just gets too brutal for today's reader. So we hint at accents, and a hint might be like this: "I cannot believe it, monsieur." So if we're reading that, we know that the character is French speaking. So the funny thing that readers will do after a while is, when they know that character is speaking, they will automatically add a French accent in their mind when they're reading it. Another example, I'd like a wee bit more Scotch lassie. So this is obviously someone from Scotland talking like that. Okay, so the tags. Most tags, here's the thing about tags. Most of them are not needed. The only time we really need tags is at the beginning of a dialogue, so that we know who the speaker is, right? Like that's the reason why tags are used. It's so that the reader can figure out who's doing the talking. So we want to avoid them if possible. Now, when we do use tags, we want to keep them very simple, like said or asked. By far, those should be the most frequent tags that you use. And I know this goes against what your grade 5 English teacher said, But believe me, when I tell you this, that today when readers are reading, we gloss over these words anyway. And so when we don't see them, when we see something really bizarre in there, it's like slamming on the brakes for the reader, and it kicks them out of the story, and that's not good. So you can have other ones, like I've got here examples. He muttered, she whispered. You can have other things in there. But we want to avoid the flowery tags, the ones like squeaked and itched and proclaimed and puked and groused, right? Like, oh, how dare you, she groused. Like that, we don't want to put that in there. That might get you an A in grade 5, but it's not going to get you an A with your readers. So I want to share with you now one of the most important secrets of good writing that you'll ever find. It's the feelings, action, dialogue triad, FAD for short. So this is how it works. Before the dialogue is actually spoken, we're going to add some feelings and action to it. So we don't have to do this for every single line of dialogue, but you want to break up some dialogue with this. So here's how it works. Mary felt a chill run up her spine. She tossed the letter into the fire. You'll never know the truth now. Okay, so here we get a sense of what she's feeling, what she's doing, and then what she's saying. So this alone, just following this, is going to improve your writing dramatically. Now, it doesn't have to be FAD all the time. It could be feelings or dialogue. It could be action or dialogue, or it could be dialogue and feelings. You can mix and match these sorts of things up all the time. But the idea is you want to break up those big chunks of dialogue with some action and some feeling in there as well. If you think back to, I like to look at the old Law and Order shows, but there are a lot of TV shows do this now too, whether they're medical dramas or cop shows or that sort of thing. Whenever the detectives go out to interview a person of interest, that person of interest is always doing something else. They're always, cutting the grass, or they're fixing their boat, or they're doing something. They're always doing things, and that gives the scene more vibrancy. It's the same thing in writing. We want to add feelings and action to it as well. Another example, terror shivered down Betsy's spine. She stood perfectly still. If you press that button, the entire planet will be destroyed, and so on. Okay, a couple other things with dialogue then. Begin a new paragraph with each new speaker. You want to minimize adverbs like this part. So how would I know? She asked angrily. Okay, that could easily be rewritten this way. How would I know? With an exclamation mark. It implies you're asking angrily. So it's to be aware of this. So she asked angrily, or he said gently. May as well just say he whispered. So it's about finding the right words. But when you're doing this, of course, this happens as you start to revise your work. After you've written a whole bunch of stories, you're going to be doing this naturally. Your first draft is going to start looking really, really good, because now you know, and you've built the skills into your brain. But the first time through, there will be all kinds of puked and groused and angrily and all that other stuff in there. So you'll fix those when you go for your revisions. Okay, so yes, be aware of what you're doing. Events are always chronological. Dialogue, FAD, that's the big one. And limit the flowery tags, of course. So a couple other things to watch out for. Vary your sentence length so that it's interesting. Try to avoid starting too many sentences with pronouns, because that can get a little off-putting. Avoid the was, were at the start of the sentences, like it was a dark and stormy night, because that's telling, that's not showing. And if we can, we always want to show. And try to avoid using the same words over and over and over. I know I do that a lot. I fall in love with words and I can just keep using them. So that's a common one as well. So your challenge now for today is to finish that first draft. Get it done. Don't worry if it's any good. Just get it finished so that you have a real story from beginning to end with lots of tension and fun stuff going on. And stay tuned, because there's more coming. So in the next video, we'll take a closer look at doing some revisions and really important things that you can do fairly quickly. So we'll see you then.